So, Stephanie, in the last segment before we broke, you basically walked us through the first part of this this case against DuPont. You told us that 3M had manufactured a chemical called C8, which was used in the production of Teflon. At one point, 3M realizes this C8 chemical is bad stuff. It's extremely dangerous. We're going to get out of the business of making this stuff because we think this doesn't end well. They had told DuPont when they provided them this chemical in the first place, you need to burn it because it has no half-life. It could possibly be very toxic. It's just not going to go away. DuPont turns around and says, burning it is a little bit more expensive than we want to spend on this. How about we just dump it? And at one point, a farmer in Parkersburg, Virginia, Earl Tennant, realizes this stuff is killing his cows. We should say Earl Tennant ended up passing away of cancer himself. But he got a settlement from DuPont, which, except for the work of another citizen in that area, after getting a letter from DuPont, where DuPont says, hey, we may have spilled some of this in the water supply, gets an attorney, Rob Bilott, back involved in here. And they go back to DuPont and say, and what happens at that point?
So they filed a class action lawsuit, and there were, I think, 3,500 plaintiffs, and this gym teacher, Joe Kiger, was one of the lead plaintiffs, and they filed this class action lawsuit. And, eventually, to cut a long story short, DuPont comes to settle. So rather than taking a check for each individual, what they did instead was they decided to establish this fund that would allow them to study the risks of the chemical.
So wait, just to be clear, they file a class action lawsuit, and does DuPont settle with them, or do they? How do they start getting checks from DuPont?
So DuPont wanted to reach a settlement.
Okay.
Within the class action lawsuit, and they said, well, let's do this. Instead of each one of us collecting an individual check, what we want to do is start a human health study. And Rob Bilott's genius, is able to get these people to agree to it, because the agreement was, we're going to put this money towards one of the largest human health studies of all kind. If this panel of epidemiologists, which both parties had to agree to, both DuPont and the plaintiffs had to agree to this, if this study comes back and they say we can't find a definitive link to anything, then all of the people going forward couldn't file any personal injury cases against DuPont. So DuPont would be safe from those. And I think DuPont was so confident that there wouldn't be a clear link that they agreed to do this, foolishly now in hindsight, as we see. So Rob Bilott and these people designed one of the most groundbreaking studies. It took them 7 years. They offered people checks to come in and get their blood tested. They tested, I think, upwards of 60,000 people in the Parkersburg and surrounding areas. And after 7 years, they came back and they found links of C8 exposure to a multitude of illnesses, including testicular cancer, colon cancer, kidney cancer, high blood pressure, et cetera, et cetera. So they found these 6 diseases that they could link it to, which then spawned another lawsuit where now all these people could file personal injury cases against DuPont.
Okay, and this is
it's less weedy. It's less weedy when you watch the film. So
well, yeah, I would
say I do a better job explaining it on screen, and it is now available on iTunes and Amazon to watch. But it is it's a very complex story, but it's an extraordinary story.
Yes, and it's a fascinating story, and it's one that is frankly shocking. And in the end, Mike Papantonio of Ring and Fire, Ring of Fire, ends up in the courtroom handling the first of what could potentially be 3,500 different cases with Dupont. And folks should really check out the film to find that out. But I want to, before we just have about 2 or 3 minutes left here. What does the word, where's the title, The Devil We Know? Where does that come from? Because I think one of the things about this story, it is obviously it's a fascinating, thrilling story. But what is so important about this story is it reveals, and we're talking about one of the largest chemical companies in the U.S. It reveals something about the corporate personality, if you will, or I should say the personality of corporations and the ability of human beings to become part of a corporation and allow for horrible things because in some way they feel some type of distance from these decisions. What does The Devil We Know refer to?
The title for the film comes from one of the internal memos that we found where, I'm paraphrasing, but the company was discussing that, they knew these risks associated with C8 and they were discussing alternatives. And they said, basically any other product we're going to come up with is going to have its own set of problems. So it's better just to stick with C8 because it's the devil we know.
I mean,
and that was how these decisions were made. And all the while they were clearly seeing that, this was being, causing cancer in the animals that they were testing in, even in primate studies. So they knew these risks and they continued to go ahead and manufacture the products with them. And it's important to note that when, we say Teflon, but what we don't realize is that C8 and Teflon aren't just in pans. It's in, if it's waterproof or grease proof, it tends to be Teflon or some version therein. So this is in our rugs, this is in our tooth floss, this is in the lining of fast food wrappers and popcorn bags. This is everywhere. So it's not just about changing your pads, but it's your pans. This is really a very pervasive ingredient in things that we are using every day that we're letting our children sleep on and that we're walking on. It's everywhere.
We just have a minute left, Stephanie. But what is that? I just want to get that devil we know when they say, this is causing cancer, but something else we could develop could also cause cancer. We should just stick with the one that we know what that it causes cancer. What does that say about the incentive structure for corporations?
I mean, I think what it says is we need to max out our profits on this, right? We're in it for the bottom line. And so until their feet were being held to the fire, they were going to continue manufacturing the product. It didn't matter if it made people sick. It just mattered that it made them money.
It is absolutely shocking. And when I have an opportunity to talk to tort lawyers like this, they all have stories about smaller cases, bigger cases that involve this type of complete lack of humanity in the pursuit of profits. And I think your film, The Devil We Know, captures that incredibly. Thank you so much for your time today, Stephanie. I really appreciate it.